Welcome to Flyover Conservative Podcast with David and Stacey Whited, where we break down current events and examine culture through the lens of conservative Christian values.
Today on the Flyover Conservative Podcast, we're going to be talking to someone who I consider a national treasure. Yes. Every time I hear him speak, I not only understand an issue better, but I see it from other angles and perspectives. And then even more importantly, I see how a lot of isolated things really intertwine and who are the connecting characters between them. And then he does an amazing job, too, of tying things up and seeing it from heaven's view. What's God's perspective on what's happening? He understands things both. And if you hear his description in his X, it's somebody everybody would love to have dinner with. He's a journalist, he's an author, he's an educator, but the adjective, the active thing is exposing evil.
I love it.
Well, he picked a good job description because there's plenty of evil to expose.
And he does a great job of doing that.
That would be a full-time job, 20 hours a day, pretty much, and he does it through lots of outlets. He's one of the most influential thinkers in America today, Mr. Alex Newman.
Yay!
Alex, thanks for jumping on. I want to start out right out of the gate by making sure people know the different places to follow and track you. We love having you on. You're a semi-regular guest as often as we can possibly get you. But the kind of conversations and the different places your tentacles reach is amazing. I don't know how you get it all done, but there is a lot of evil to expose. So I'm glad that you are busy at the task. But what are all the different places? We have Liberty Sentinel, and then you also have syndicated radio conversations that are out as well. What are the best ways for you to be sticky in people's world? And we'll put those links all in the notes below. Make sure that you're kind of a regular voice in people's heads processing these kind of events that are happening right now.
Oh, well, thank you guys so much. It's always a great honor to be with you. It's really appreciate so much you having me on and all that you do. Easiest places to find me, libertysentinel.org is my homepage for my personal company, libertysentinel.org. People can get the free newsletter there. I'm also senior editor at the New American magazine. People can check that out at thenewamerican.com. And even people who don't subscribe to the print magazine, which I hope they will, they can get the free daily headlines in their inbox every day with the important news of the day. For those looking on the education front, I'm a senior fellow at Classical Conversations, a wonderful, wonderful program. In fact, I just released a new book with the CEO of Classical Conversations, Woke and Weaponized. That'll be available on Amazon soon, and it's already for pre-order on my website. And then X is a simple place, @AlexNewman_JOU. I publish all over the place. I'm working on a big article right now about Latin America for the Epic Times. But yeah, those are a few of the places. And of course, one of my favorite places ever to be is right here on this program. So thank you guys for having me.
I bet your parents are incredibly proud.
No doubt about it.
When they show up at Bunko or whatever they do, they're probably like, hey,
That's my son.
Just so you know. Have you heard of it?
You guys are so kind.
It would be amazing. Well, you had a tweet back, I think, in
December the 5th.
Over a month ago that sort of, sprang new legs and sprouted new leaves and new fruit because it's really tied together. I'd like to kind of jump in with that because you've been talking about things that are happening now before everybody else was with Maduro.
Yeah, with Venezuela. Can you talk about that? So you actually had what is happening in Venezuela under Maduro is just the tip of the iceberg. It is a key part of the color revolution unfolding in the U.S. right now. That came out on December 5th after you did an interview with USA Watchdog, but obviously, huge news over the weekend, the arrest of Maduro, bringing him to the United States. Talk about that.
And how surprised were you when you saw that headline and you saw, the action the U.S. forces had taken and was such a strategic move on Saturday?
Well, I knew the Trump administration was going to do something. And I think a lot of the people in the MAGA movement are a little bit perplexed by this. They don't quite understand it. We voted to end the constant foreign wars and we don't want any more nation building. I completely get it. Trust me. After the last disasters of the last few decades, it's very easy to understand why people have had enough with the constant foreign interventionism. But Latin America is near and dear to my heart. Unlike most people in the American media, I have followed it very closely my entire career. I grew up in Latin America. I spent most of my childhood in Mexico and South America, primarily in Brazil. And so a lot of my friends are down there. I have the equivalent of a green card in Mexico. In a way, it's a second home, if you will. I have a lot of people down there that I love dearly. And when I first got into journalism, one of my first really major investigative pieces was on the communist takeover of Latin America. We all know about Cuba, but very few people understood that the whole region was being taken over by a subversive network of communists that unfortunately was being backed not just by the communist Chinese, not just by the Kremlin, but also by the deep state right here in the United States. That really got turbocharged under Barack Obama and later under Joe Biden. And so Maduro is literally the tip of the iceberg for this operation. He's not even the most important player. He's an important player because he was providing money for this network, but that is only one small piece of the puzzle. So I'll try to summarize it really, really quickly, and then if you guys want to go into some details on anything in particular, happy to do it. But back in 1990, we had kind of the supposed end of the Cold War. You know, communism was allegedly collapsing, and the free world won, and woohoo! And the communists were not happy about it. So Fidel Castro, a mass murderer who enslaved Cuba, by the way, with the help of our State Department, with the help of the New York Slimes, with the help of the Soviet Union, he was a freedom fighter and the George Washington of Latin America is what the New York Slimes was painting him as. He decided to get together with his buddy Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, who at the time was a radical left-wing community organizer in Brazil. Today, he is the illegitimate president of Brazil. That should tell you something. They got together with the FARC. In Spanish, it's the Fuerzas Armadas Revolucionarias de Colombia, the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia. It's a terrorist group. They have been murdering civilians and trafficking cocaine for 50 years, trying to take over Colombia. And then several other key players, the Sandinistas in Nicaragua, mass murdering communists, and some others. They got together in Sao Paulo, where I lived for 4 years. I was just in Brazil a couple months ago. And they created a new movement called the Sao Paulo Forum in English. In Portuguese, the Foro de Sao Paulo. In Spanish, el Foro de San Pablo. And the goal of this movement, they actually put it down on paper in 1997, was to reclaim in Latin America what had been lost in Eastern Europe, namely communist slavery, communist totalitarianism. So with the backing of the Russians, with the backing of the communist Chinese, with the backing of the Council on Foreign Relations and the Rockefeller crowd and the Obamas here in the United States, they were steadily taking over country after country after country. And here's what makes this network different than just like a normal political movement. A normal political movement, a legal, legitimate political movement, tries to convince voters about the superiority of their values, their belief system, their politics. This movement was using the proceeds from criminal activities, cocaine trafficking, kidnapping, extortion, stealing money. And by the way, Lula got caught doing this, right? This should have been front page news all over the world. The guy was involved in stealing money from Petrobras. By the way, Soros was a big investor, and pumping it into expanding the communist revolution throughout Latin America. He was arrested, he was tried, he was convicted, he was put in jail, and then he was busted out of prison by his buddy Alexandre de Moraes, the head of the Brazilian kangaroo Supreme Court. So all these guys come together, and little by little, they're taking over Latin American country after Latin American country. And the big cash cow for all of this was first Hugo Chavez, right? They stole all the oil assets from the people who owned them, the investors, the companies, the people, and they put that money at the service of the revolution, and they were importing enormous amounts of drugs into the United States. And so Trump has talked about the drug element and the oil element. He hasn't been as public as I think he should be in explaining how this money was not just enriching these criminals in Venezuela, it was being used to enslave Latin America. And here's the kicker. Here's why it's so important for Americans to understand this. These people were being aided and abetted by the Council on Foreign Relations, which I call it deep state headquarters in the United States. In fact, their head of Latin American division, Julia Swig, for a long time, Castro apologist, huge proponent of this. They call it the pink tide. I call it the red tsunami. You had Barack Obama openly aiding and abetting the members of this subversive network as they took over countries. And by the way, this continues to this day. I had Congresswoman Maria Salazar, she represents my district in Miami where I'm from, on my show just a couple weeks ago saying, even under the Trump administration, there are Biden holdovers, including the U.S. ambassador in Guatemala, aiding and abetting the very same socialists that we're talking about here. So we have a massive problem, and it directly affects the United States. And I'll give people a few clues about this, and we can get into more depth. You remember when the Black Lives Matter co-founder Opal Tometi posted on her Twitter account a picture of herself in Venezuela standing next to Nicolás Maduro, the mass-murdering communist dictator, also the head of the Cartel de los Soles, and said, oh, it's so great to be in a country where we have intelligent political discourse. The subversive movements that we're seeing in the United States are directly tied not just to Venezuela, because Venezuela is puppet of Cuba, which is a puppet of the Chi-Coms and the Russians, and international communism, which are, of course, puppets of the deep state. So it's deep. It's like the Russian doll. You take off one and you got another. But Maduro is a key linchpin in this. Now, whether what Trump did was the right approach, I don't know. I'm glad I'm not involved in having to make those decisions. But there's so much more to Maduro than what we're being told in the fake media.
Well, it was clean and surgical, that's for sure. And, it definitely puts a lot of teeth behind his bark with other countries. I know they're talking about Colombia and, there's, a lot of other, the expression, fiddle around and find out has become quite popular. And everybody that's playing the fiddle right now is like, hey, maybe we should probably, pay attention to this. Maduro was, famously, dancing, leading up to this and kind of, arrogant in his disdain
egging Trump on as
well. For what was happening. Let's talk about these ideas real quick of these socialist takeovers, because you think somebody with a resume like Lula, that's not something you would want on a one sheet, to be able to open doors. And we've seen it regularly in our country. It's almost a joke with us when you see so many characters in politics in the U.S. and around the world that are either incompetent or corrupt. You think, how could they move forward in life? Because it's hard to move up in a company when you're late. You have a bad track record. But in politics, it almost seems like that's why you move forward. It's because of your corruption, because of your compromise, because of your incompetence. You're easily manipulated and used. And these ideas tend to take hold, especially when economic structures don't seem to be working for everybody. They're kind of convinced that they're a victim. There's no rungs on the ladder to be able to get ahead. Is that why these ideas can kind of grab a hold? Because an idea like communism and socialism, it doesn't have this great resume. It'd be like an NFL coach always losing but continuing to get promoted and get new jobs. It's like you've never won anywhere. Why are you continually hired and get a new job? Is it these ideas take hold because people are just disenfranchised, and do they work better in the poor areas? And does that kind of tie in why there's been such a gutting of the middle class in our country, and it seems to just continue to grow at the university level in America?
Well, there's a lot there, David, and the short answer is yes, right? Latin America is different than the United States. They do not and have not had a thriving middle class like we have had, and to the extent that they have had quote-unquote capitalism, it's largely been crony capitalism, where the elites kind of control all the wealth and basically dole out the crumbs to the peasant class. And so communism then has much more appeal. Now, Javier Milei is obviously the exception to that rule. This is a real free market guy. He even wants to have real free market money and so on. But Latin America was ripe for this. But very much like in the United States, they usually don't come openly announcing what they're doing. Until recently, Lula wasn't publicly advertising the fact that he was a communist. I mean, now he does. He says, yes, I'm a communist. They call me a communist. I'm proud to be a communist. But until recently, we're just social democrats. We just want a fairer, the same kind of language that we saw from Barack Hussein Obama, who, by the way, was helping these characters at every step of the way. The same is true with the wannabe dictator of Colombia, Gustavo Petro. This guy came in on a publicly, at least, moderate platform. But make no mistake, he is a commie through and through. And so they come in and they very much like Barack Obama, they use language that's very superficial, that's very appealing. They highlight real grievances and then pretend like their ideas are going to be the solution to those grievances. So this is the tactic that they've been using all over the place. And it's been more successful than in other places in Latin America, partly because they have this subversive network behind them that has been so powerful. They've been able to rig elections, right? And these people do not care about criminal laws. They will murder you. They will imprison you. They will torture you. They will steal money from the state-run oil company to finance fraudulent elections like we saw in Chile. So these are people who are not guided or even restrained by basic moral principles or moral decency. And they're liars. So very much like Satan disguises himself as an angel of light, these communists disguise themselves as liberators who are going to redistribute power and wealth to the people when really they're going to redistribute power to themselves. And Gustavo Petro is a very good example of this. And people didn't catch this. It really bothered me. I tried to bring attention to this and just nobody cared. The president of Colombia was on American soil just a few months ago with a bullhorn on the streets of New York telling American soldiers not to obey their commander-in-chief, not to obey President Trump. He said, you need to stand with humanity. Now, credit is due to the Trump administration. They kicked his butt out of the country. They said, get back to Colombia. We're revoking your visa. That should have been front page news across this entire country? Why is a foreign head of state on our soil encouraging sedition among our military? It's because they're preparing for something. Maduro is involved, Gustavo Petro is involved, the dictatorship in Cuba is involved, and Lula in Brazil are absolutely involved. And I think Trump's people have a decent understanding of this. It's hard, though, because the entire federal government has been filled with agents, at least sympathetic, if not openly supportive of this Latin American communist network for decades. There are agents of Cuba, there are agents of Venezuela at the policy-making level in the State Department, in the National Security Council, and other places, and they are saying to the president and the president's top advisors, oh, no, it's no big. So we have a huge problem on our hands here, and I regard it as a very serious threat to our national security.
Question for you. Why do they always have to take people to New York? Like, so he's going to stand in front of a judge in New York. Well, that seems kind of concerning as we see that the judges aren't always the utmost, the best for actually what's going on in our country. What is your thought on that? And why is it always New York? And is there any concern on your part with him being in front of a judge in New York?
It is concerning. New York, unfortunately, I regard as one of the most corrupt federal court districts, and it is one of the most powerful federal court districts for sure. And that's partly because you have Wall Street there. That's one of the reasons why so many of these high-profile prosecutions happen in that district, because if you can make an argument that involves money moving around, typically there's going to be a nexus there with Wall Street, with the Southern District of New York. I would have rather have seen him tried in another jurisdiction. I mean, his machinations have been all throughout the United States. I mean, many, many Americans are dead as a direct result of his actions. And I think you probably could have prosecuted him in another jurisdiction. And, we also have this system in the Department of Justice where the U.S. senators from a particular state are supposed to approve of the judicial nominees and even when it comes to the prosecutorial nominees. And that makes jurisdictions like New York especially unsuitable for these kinds of things. It's unfortunate. And we were talking a little bit before the show. There are plenty of deep state treasonous criminals responsible for waging war on our people right here in this country. We didn't need to go to Caracas to find bad guys. There's plenty right here. Flynn and I talked about quite a few of them in an article we just did for the New American called Justice for Russiagate. There's a whole list in there of these guys who are involved in massive crimes, and they're not in handcuffs yet. So I'd like to know why.
That is a really great question. We want some justice.
Is there any element of election interference in this as well? There's a lot of levels of corruption, but Venezuela consistently comes up since 2020 with Sidney Powell stuff, and lots of different. It always kind of comes up as like maybe a haven for hacking in elections. And then when we see that, obviously there was a lot of question marks around Brazil's most recent election. Is Venezuela sort of a hub of the wheel for election interference globally, maybe within the U.S. as well?
There's no question about it. In fact, Venezuela needs to be best understood as a colony of the Cuban dictatorship, right? And the Cubans figured out long ago that armed revolution was probably not going to be a successful vehicle for enslaving populations anymore. So going back to the founding of this Foro de Sao Paulo, they said, hey, we'll stand candidates up in elections. And if we can't take power through revolution, maybe we'll succeed this way. And of course, to go back to what we were talking about earlier, you can fool some people sometimes, but you can't fool all the people all the time. So if you want to win consistently in elections for ideas that have ended up in the murder of over 100 million people just in the last 100 years, not even including the ones killed in wars and starvation, you have to have a mechanism to make sure you can keep winning the elections. And of course, voter fraud is the mechanism they chose. And so if you look back even decades ago, under Hugo Chavez's leadership, they were working on creating voting systems through machines, through software that would be hackable, that they could use to change electoral results. Unfortunately, the tentacles of this have reached into the United States. They have reached into dozens of countries around the world. Emerald Robinson over at Lindell TV, wonderful lady. She's done some really, really good reporting on this. Patrick Byrne has helped expose some of this. General Michael Flynn understands it very well. There are some former CIA guys who have exposed this in a book. This is a really important thing. And frankly, if I had to guess, I don't know what Trump was thinking, but if I had to guess why he decided to do something this bold, this unprecedented, my guess is the voting fraud nexus probably played a big part in that.
I would 100% agree.
Especially with elections coming up,
Yeah.
Cleaning up some,
That's right.
some of those things.
Definitely. I do have a question for you, and I know you got another one there, David. I just have a question as I was thinking about the vice president of Venezuela and her coming out and saying, hey, I support Maduro. Does she even have a choice? I mean, with the drug cartels and all of that, even if she wanted to actually say, hey, I partner with the United States, it wouldn't even be possible for her, would it? I mean, her life would be on the line, I would
No matter
think.
what position she takes, she needs to stand behind the podium, kind of going like this, probably, to stay out of the crosshairs.
But she's in big trouble. The reality is her and her husband, the Rodriguez couple, they are very, very important in this network. There's been a lot of very clever people, and I don't know whether they're correct, but people with knowledge of these kinds of things who've told me that the Rodriguez family, the husband and wife, the wife is the vice president right now, husband used to be, is actually the real power behind the throne in Venezuela. So whether that's true or not, I don't know. But she's in a real tough spot right now. I do not envy where she is sitting. And frankly, I don't envy where Trump is sitting right now either. I mean, that remark about we're going to be taking over Venezuela, pretty sure that's not what the MAGA movement voted for. Pretty sure we're $40 trillion in debt with $200 trillion in unfunded liabilities. And I know they're talking about the oil is going to help pay for all this. I don't know. But the Rodriguez couple needs to be looked at under a magnifying glass because they're deeply involved in all of this.
There's a lot of talk about oil because it seems to be at the center of a lot of our invasions that don't go well. Seems to be kind of the engine behind it. But it was U.S. companies that were kicked out of there that were, had legitimate businesses. But there's also another element of the oil in cutting it off from going to Russia and China. So it is, kind of a 3D chess element, to the oil distribution, regardless if it enhances the United States, it does seem to be hamstringing our enemies, at least.
Yeah, well, there's several really important things to mention here. First of all, the American companies that had their assets nationalized in Venezuela, we think of them as like mean, abstract companies, and I'm sure there's some bad guys operating at the top of the oil company. I mean, most of them are corporate members of the Council on Foreign Relations, for crying out loud, right? So, so they're not necessarily our friends.
They're not MAGA.
Right. But these oil companies are owned by everyday Americans. I mean, I've got a little, retirement account, and I own some Exxon, and I own some, some of these oil companies, and that's my money that was stolen here. American companies, American investors, American engineers spent huge amounts of money and took a big risk going down there to develop. The same thing happened in the Middle East, right? They didn't know how to get oil out of the ground. They didn't know what to do with the oil if they could get it out of the ground. It was because American engineering and American companies came in and made this all possible that they were able to get this money. And so, the Venezuelan nationalization of American oil assets, that was very improper. Is it the U.S. government's job to protect American oil companies? No, not in my opinion. They took a gamble. They took a risk and they lost. So that's unfortunate. But, there's a lot of people now, even some in the MAGA movement, who are suggesting that Trump did this to steal their oil. And there are others. I've seen others that Trump is a puppet of the Zionists, and that's why he did it. They didn't have a Rothschild bank. I don't take that stuff all that seriously. And here's one of the reasons why on the oil issue in particular. The United States has more oil than we'll ever know what to do with. The reason we've had oil shortages and energy shortages, the reason the prices have been so high, is because our own government has kept it locked up under various pretexts. Oh, we don't want to hurt a desert tortoise. We don't want to hurt a lizard. We don't want to hurt a seal or something. We've got oil coming out of our ears in this country. We probably have more oil than any other country in the world. And now Trump has made clear that we are able to access it. So we don't need Venezuelan oil to power our economy. We can build nuclear power plants. So I don't think oil is the real reason. The reason I think oil is so important to this equation, though, is because the oil money that the Venezuelan government was stealing from the Venezuelan people, and of course from American investors and global investors who were invested in American oil companies, was being used to fund revolution throughout Latin America and also to fund revolution inside the United States of America.
So it's not so much that we need it, but it does keep that from being an asset used against us, directly there. It's an interesting thing. There's a show called Parks and Rec. I don't think it runs anymore. I've only seen one episode of it, but I've seen a lot of clips. Our kids were big fans of it. And there's a character, Ron Swanson. They showed me all these clips from the show, these little, short, reels and things. It's a lot of cleverness to it, a lot of politics. It's comedy. But they did one episode where it's based on a small town in Indiana. and they had this like sister city that they were, doing this kind of, Peace Corps kind of thing with or whatever. And this
From Venezuela.
From Venezuela. So the sister city in Venezuela who came to visit them in their Pawnee, Indiana. Yeah, there's the image from it. But the premise of the whole show is these, three military-looking leaders. They talk about, at your hotel you'll have cable and all these things. He said, I have 14,000 channels at my home. Everything is so opulent.
Wealthy,
it's so wealthy. They laugh. They take him to this new park that they just built in Pawnee, and he's like, "Is this where the peasants come?" Because it is so funny with the premise because they're so wealthy, and they offer like a gold-plated gun that Chavez had used, and everything was just over the top, how much wealth they had. They only drank bottled water, and they had the one guy peel the banana for him, because they're used to servants and everything being so great. And it's interesting to see where in this timeline did it go where it works in a comedy for Venezuela to be synonymous with opulence, to where I've seen some numbers that say like the average Venezuelan has lost like 30 pounds in the last few years, accidentally. Not because they're dieting, because of scarcity. Mm-hmm. So where in that timeline, and was it, how much of it was the inevitable impact of nepotism and socialism and Maduro placing incompetent people in charge of oil refinery and complex jobs maybe they weren't qualified for? There's a lot of the things that we try to do in our country as well. Where in this timeline did it go from them being so rich that it's used in comedy, to show the disparity of how much wealthier they are than Americans, to where they're eating pets?
Yeah. Well, that's what happens whenever central planning comes to any country. There is no system, there's no universe in which central planning can work. For one, because it violates the basic principles that God has given us to order human civilization, starting with the very obvious, do not steal, right? Socialism is based on theft. Nobody gets to have private property. The government will steal everything from everyone, at least on paper, and redistribute it according to the government's wishes. So I taught economics for 12 years. I'm actually very passionate about this issue. Even if the central planners were well-intentioned, there is no conceivable way in which they would have all the information necessary to make good decisions. And what always ends up happening is socialist systems not only don't create wealth, they destroy wealth, because there's no sensible means, there's no rational means for allocating resources. Instead of allocating resources to things that produce wealth, they allocate resources to things that end up consuming more wealth than they produce. And so people get poorer and poorer and poorer. So what happened when Hugo Chavez took over? Venezuela was an extremely rich country. And by the way, so was Cuba. These were some of the richest countries in the world. So was Argentina, by the way, before the socialists took over there. Latin America was very, very wealthy. They've got all the natural resources they could ever need. And when they had some semblance of free markets, they were very, very prosperous. Argentina actually had a constitution that was very similar to the American one. And you can do some really interesting experiment. When it was based on similar principles to America's, they were incredibly wealthy, one of the wealthiest countries in the whole world. And then they keep adding amendments. You have a right to food. You have a right to health care. You see the poverty goes up and the wealth goes down, down, down. So this happened in Venezuela. When Hugo Chavez took over, started attacking free markets, started putting in controls, started trying to allocate resources, started nationalizing productive assets, whether it be oil or land or farms or production, factories, whatever. People got poorer and poorer and poorer, to the point now where Venezuela is unimaginably poor. 12 million Venezuelans have had to leave the country just to be able to survive. You're right, they ate their pets. They actually broke into the zoo and ate all the zoo animals. The scale of poverty in Venezuela right now is hard for an American to even begin to understand. It's not quite Cuba levels, where they're literally now importing sugar, but it's pretty bad.
In a short period of time, from my understanding.
I mean, this isn't an old show from the 60s. This isn't Beverly Hillbillies or something. This show was popular recently enough that my kids watch it.
That's right. No, and if you talk to Venezuela, like I'm from Miami, right? We've got a massive Venezuelan diaspora there. These were wealthy people. These were people who lived well. Venezuela actually did have something of a middle class. Even the poor lived much better than in many places in the world. That's not to say that they didn't have any poverty. They did, just like we have some here. But you could go to the grocery store and you could buy whatever you wanted, right? People weren't starving. People weren't eating their pets. And so in just 20 years of socialism, I saw a really funny meme that really brings it is, right? But there was this great meme. It was Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? Japan, 70 years after being bombed with nuclear weapons, these thriving, beautiful cities and everything. And then it was contrasted with, Cuba after 70 years of socialism, and everything is just crumbling. I mean, people don't have proper clothes to wear. There's no food to eat. It happens very, very quickly because socialism is an incredibly destructive force. But I think there's a mistake that a lot of analysts make, and that is to look at communism and socialism as like an ideological economic vision. When you really boil it down, communism is just Satanism with a new disguise, right? It takes all the principles that God reveals to us about morality, about order, about how we should relate to our fellow human beings, and it flips them exactly upside down. There's a wonderful book about this written by a pastor who was tortured for years by communist savages in Romania, Pastor Richard Birnbrandt, who wrote Tortured for Christ. The book is called Marx and Satan. And what he did was he went into the archives, he pulled out Karl Marx's poetry, he looked at the evidence of Stalin and Lenin, and what he found is that these people were not atheists by any stretch of the term. Karl Marx wrote odes to Satan. He says, "With Satan I have cast my lot." Their goal is to destroy things, and the economic component is just window dressing to cover up for the evil satanic vision that is, a criminal conspiracy, you might call it, a satanic conspiracy, that is the communist movement at its core.
Wow. As we are, we'll close out here, but as we are looking at even what's happening in our own country, Mandami was sworn in, and I think he put his hand on the Quran.
Hand on the Quran.
Which was kind of interesting. But you're even seeing, the policies that he's putting in place. It'd be interesting to see at the end of his time in office what New York City looks like.
Well, it's always these best cities. New York, it's one of the greatest cities in the world. So was San Francisco, so was Portland, so was Minneapolis. And so these policies take root in the wealthiest areas. And how wealthy is Minnesota when they can lose $9 billion and nobody really noticed?
I know.
I've joked on the show a few times, but the Chiefs are building a new stadium for like $1.5 billion. So, you could build a whole row. You could build a whole neighborhood of NFL stadiums for what they lost in money that all went to Somalia without really anybody raising an eyebrow. You got to be doing pretty well. They don't do these things in Jackson, Mississippi.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and America has been very blessed materially because we have largely followed biblical principles in terms of how we organize our government and our economy. And that has given a real buffer to places like New York, to places like Minnesota, where they can try out some of these foolish ideas without bringing the whole house of cards down necessarily on their heads. But what's happening in New York, I think, is a very troubling omen of where we're heading. You can look at the cities of Western Europe right now, and you'll see this more clearly. It's this weird fusion of socialism and Islamism, the red-green axis, that is really taking over. And, people are very concerned about the Islamic threat, and I share those concerns. For 1,500 years, jihadists have been beheading Christians. So this is not a new thing. But I always remind people, there were no Muslims in the European parliaments when they opened up the borders and invited millions of Muslims in. There was no Muslims in the U.S. Congress when they opened up our borders in 1965 and invited the world to come settle here. So this is part of a strategic plan. And if we continue down this path, we're going to end up the same way that all those other countries have ended up when they try out Islamist or communist ideas, and that is with despair and misery and hunger and a loss of freedom. So we have a clear choice ahead of us as Americans. Are we going to return to God? Are we going to repent of our wickedness? Are we going to stop this foolishness? Or are we going to keep going down this path that we know where it leads? It leads to destruction. So those are your options, America. You could choose this day who you will serve, because if you won't serve God, you will pay the price.
You've studied the life cycle of it, with on several continents, lots of countries. You've seen this whole trajectory, from birth, middle age to death, all the way through. You see it happening here. And I still walk away perplexed. How do such bad ideas take root as well as they do? And for me, I kind of keep coming back to our education system, because we sort of teach that that's a good idea. You're more likely to have a former terrorist speak at a major university than you would Ben Shapiro. It's like there's no. our universities are not a place that you go to think. They're a place you go to be indoctrinated, because thinking requires, multiple inputs, and it's just indoctrination, with the exception of a few, Hillsdale and maybe I could list them on a hand. Colleges, I would say, if your kid went there, they're probably less likely to be messed up, mentally. But is that the main way? Is it through our celebrities? Is it through what's the main point that allows such horrific ideas these didn't take place 200 years ago? That Parks and Rec episode Colton had on the screen there, it aired in 2009. Yeah. And it made sense. Now they're eating their pets. So this is pretty recent history. We don't have to go back into black and white or World War II photos or something, or Civil War photos. This is in our current vocabulary. How does that keep happening, Alex?
Well, I think there are really two key issues here that are driving this, and they're both interrelated, right? The first, as you pointed out, is the so-called education system. That's why I've written 3 books on the education system. I regard it as potentially the most important driver of all of this evil. If you go back to the very beginning of our history, the first education law that was ever passed in North America, 1647. It was called the Old Deluder Satan Act by our very pious ancestors, the Pilgrims, in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. And the premise of their law, as they said right in the text of the statute, was that old deluder Satan, one of his chief projects is to keep men from knowledge of the scriptures. And therefore, everybody in this colony must learn how to read so that everybody can end up reading their Bibles, because if they don't read their Bibles, Satan will deceive them, and we will end up in the same mess that some of our European cousins are in.
Yep.
And unfortunately, we have drifted so far from that vision to where today education is entirely devoid of the scriptures. In fact, if anything, it mocks the scriptures, it contradicts the scriptures, and that's how we ended up in this place. So if we don't deal with the crisis that we have in so-called education, there is no way we will extricate ourselves from this absent some sort of divine intervention. The other is, of course, and I know we don't need to open up a new can of worms. We've already covered so much today, but that's the money system, right? They seize control of our monetary system. Yeah. They print money out of nothing, lend it to the U.S. government as debt. They don't print the interest, so therefore we are enslaved to this perpetual debt. And they use this money printing to buy everything, to fund political campaigns, to buy companies, to take over our education system, to the point where they've now captured the hearts and minds of probably a majority of the younger generation. So we've got our work cut out for us. We've got a lot to do. And I think, frankly, those are the two key things, education and the money system, where if we don't deal with them, we're in huge trouble. If we can deal with those, we can turn this ship around before it sinks.
Well, your job description is exposing evil, and those are the two. You taught economics for 12 years, and you've written books on the education system, so those are the two best places to find it.
Yeah, when David was asking the question, I was looking for your book. I remember we interviewed you on Indoctrinating Our Children to Death, that is an important book for people to check out. Where's the best place for them to find that book, Alex?
So that one is available on Amazon right now, Indoctrinating Our Children to Death. It's been endorsed by wonderful patriots like General Flynn and our Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, and many others. The new one, it's not even available on Amazon yet, but it'll be out very soon. You can pre-order it at my website. I've already started shipping copies out. It's called Woke and Weaponized, and that's available at my store at libertysentinel.org. People can click on the store there, the store button at the top right, and if they want to pre-order it there, I'll get it in the mail within the next week or two, and people should have it within a couple of weeks. But that will be available on Amazon as well, hopefully within the next couple of weeks here.
Perfect. Alex, thank you so much for your time. We really, really appreciate it. Flyover family, maybe make sure you go to libertysentinel.org, libertysentinel.org. Thanks again, Alex. We really appreciate it.
I'm Linda Bamber Olson, the inventor of the Wave Watch, the world's first frequency therapy watch. It features over 1,100 targeted frequencies. These sounds are acoustical and they move through your body. You don't necessarily have to hear it. So that's why we have so many testimonies for ADD and ADHD, emotions, headaches, joints, and so many more.
One of the main things I've learned when it comes to economics is we don't live in the independent little silos that we did, in my life, over the last 50, some years. Like in today's world, it's more than ever what happens somewhere else ripples effects here. We have a global economy, so things that are happening globally impact us here locally. And sometimes it's some of the craziest things. It'll be this, and it trickles around and boomerangs around this bank in Japan and this Deutsche Bank and this.
You're like, how are these connected?
Like how is that making things here more expensive, and shipping and costs and cattle and where things come from and food, and it's a very complicated web of things that hopefully will become less complicated, become less globalized in the future, and more independent.
Yes.
But right now we do have to pay close watch on what's happening around the world, how it affects us. And here's the deal. There's more happening around the world than ever before. When we can go just like knock on a door and take a president and say, no, you're coming out with us. It's like, wow, that's a big thing. A lot of stuff happened. How does that impact the economy? How does it impact us? Well, a guy that has not one but 2 PhDs, and he's the author of Thriving in the Economic Tsunami. And we have more of a tsunami than ever before. I thought we had a tsunami in 20, 21, 22, 23 tsunami. Those were just little surfing waves. We have a tsunami going on in the world right now, and we need to break it down with the one, the only Dr. Kirk Elliott.
Yay! Welcome.
Well, it's good to be with you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. 2026, the year of the fix. Excited to see what God is going to do this year. It'll be huge.
It's been a bit since we've had John and travels and things going on, and I tell you, since then, silver, you used to talk, our last show, you were talking silver's going to hit 68 by the end of the year. And while that seemed like, wow, are you serious? But you were saying that all of 2025, that by the end of the year it'd be at 68. And then sure enough, it went past that and then just bolted out to like 83. And then, there's the paper silver stuff going on, everything comes back down. And then, we go and collect a foreign dictator and send him to Brooklyn and, all these things. So I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, man, how is all this going to impact stuff? I know oil plays a role. Maybe oil's gonna be cheaper. Maybe it'll be more. Japan carry trade. There's so many things happening. I'm like, what in the world is going on? And without our North Star here, I've been kind of confused. I just see lots of noise. In my feed, there was a guy saying, "Get out of silver now." There's another guy saying, "Silver's in. They're the biggest bull run in all of history." And there's this, Asian AI guy that goes around. There's so much noise in this space because of the activity. There's more experts than ever before. And, you got 20 years and 2 PhDs in this. So I'm really curious what's going to happen.
Well, boy, I don't pull those projections just out of thin air, right? Because even at the beginning of the year, and you're right, it's like, yeah, we thought, and we talked about it, thought silver was going to be 67 to 75 by the year end. Some people said, Kirk, whatever you think, you're an economist, we'll believe you. Some people said, you don't know what you're smoking because it was 28. It was 28.
Wow.
It's like, how is it ever going to get up to 67, 75? Here's the thing. When you start running out of the world's most important commodity, it's silver. It's used in like everything that we've talked about so many times. Electric vehicles, batteries, solar power, AI chips, cryptocurrency mining, nuclear. Every electronic circuit board, silver, right? So it's like we've never entered a world or had one where you've actually run out of something that's needed for manufacturing, like literally run out, right? So like gold doesn't fit into this category. Mm-hmm. When gold has shortages, it's not the end of the world if people can't get it, because it's not actually manufacturing stuff. It's a financial metal. It's a hedge. It's an inflationary hedge. It's what people look to when they lose trust in governments and banks. And if it's gone, well, it's gone. The prices just go up. Silver, if it's gone, Sony goes out of business. Tesla goes out of business. Samsung goes out of business. Well, this wouldn't actually be a bad thing if there's no like missiles and torpedoes that can be made. Well, then they're going to have to stop wars, right? It's like, right. I don't know. But literally, this is where we're starting to see this now, where the exchanges like London, LBMA, ran out of silver. The exchange for physicals, instead of just 300 ounces of paper contracts for every 1 ounce of physical delivery, of course, that's going to run out. There's not enough silver for people to be had. So then what happens? lease rates go up, prices start to go through the ceiling. But you've got people like, Samsung that need it for their battery technology, right? And so they say, well, London, you're stupid. You ran out of silver. We can't get it from you anymore. So what did they do? They go to Durango, Mexico, cut a deal for all of the production with one of the largest mines in Mexico. It's like, okay, next 2 years, it's all coming to Samsung. We knew that this was going to happen. It's what I would do. It's what you both would do if you're a business owner and your main supplier stops supplying. You're going to find another supplier, right? So, and what price are they going to start to offer? Whatever price necessary, right? So they don't go out of business. So, anyways, this is the world that we're starting to see, right? And yeah, sure enough, it did hit more than 67 to 75. We got up to 83.
Wow.
83 before the end of the year, corrected down harshly to 71 in a matter of 70 minutes.
It blew past those records like my scale during the holidays. It just like didn't even slow down. It kept momentum.
I mean, you got to slow down the eating, buddy. Because but literally, it was like insane. 70 minutes. Nobody's ever seen anything like that. Well, then 4 days later, we're almost up to 78 again. See, there's so much oxygen in this market because of one thing: no supply, high demand. It's always going to cause prices to go up.
Which has always been the appeal with it, because in a world where they can print money like crazy, and it doesn't seem to slow down during the Trump administration at all. Like they're still, creating money like crazy with every big bill they pass. You can't just print silver, and so it's always been the cool thing about it is it's something you can touch. It's physical. You can trust it, especially with the physical bullion product.
Well, so I want to talk just a little bit about demand, and then we've got to talk about supply. Then we need to talk about Venezuela, which happened over the weekend. All these things are like insane, bonkers things that we need to address. So remember earlier in the year last year, it's like it's a new year. You got to start changing verbiage. We were talking about Samsung's battery, the solid silver core solid state battery that's going to double the range on electric vehicles. It's going to take the charging time from 12 hours to 9 minutes, and it's going to last like 20 years. Who would not want that technology, right? Well, so estimates are now that that's going to take up 20% of the world's mining supply every year. That one thing. Now, they didn't happen to be first, right? We all thought, oh, this is Samsung. There's a company called BYD, largest electric vehicle manufacturer on the planet. Have you heard of them?
No.
Nope.
Me neither. It's because they don't sell them here. It's a Chinese company, right? But they got billions of people in China. BYD is like China's version of Tesla, right? So they've already been working on this technology for a long time. And I think Samsung was just like saying, we got to keep up, right? And nobody really knew. Everyone thought it was Samsung's thing. Well, they're going live in June of this year. Largest EV manufacturer in the world, same battery type technology. It's going to take up another 20% of global mining supply. So two companies, now 40% of global mining supply. Last week, Elon Musk made a statement. It's like, you know what? We want the cars to charge faster. We're going to go from 12-volt system to 48-volt system so everything charges faster, right? And the batteries last longer and blah, blah, blah. Well, just to retrofit and to put new harnesses on all these batteries, to actually supply the extra voltage, each car is going to need three ounces more of silver. How many electrical vehicles are there? A lot. So imagine 3 ounces per car that they're probably going to get like recall notices on. It's like, hey, we're gonna change all this stuff. Well, then Ford and GM said, well, we got to do the same thing. Another 3 companies needing silver. That's another estimated 13%. So now we're up to 53% of all the global mining supply, which is 3 companies. We haven't even addressed solar or AI chips.
Or Trump forcing Europe to defend itself, and they're amping up their military spending like crazy, because they're doing Ukraine on their own. So on all fronts, there's just more of everything.
Yeah, so there's way more demand here, right? So that's not slowing down. So we have to make note of this. This isn't slowing down. Supply is diminishing. Now, look what happened over the weekend in Venezuela. Like Trump and the US military bombs the living daylights out of Venezuela, right? It's like, okay, was this really about the drug war? I don't think so. It's probably about oil and natural resources. I mean, Venezuela has more oil reserves than any country on the planet. People don't really realize this. At today's oil prices, it's about $15 trillion worth of oil that they've got in reserve. It's like, what? It's a lot, right? But with this attack, the shipping channels outside of Venezuela and their territory is the shipping channels for both Chad in Africa, Peru in South America, where the silver comes into the refineries in North America. It's not coming in. So this is why silver bumped up 5% this morning on an attack with Venezuela. It's like, what does that have to do with anything? It has to do a lot to do with supply channels and supply chain disruptions, right? So you're looking at this kind of stuff. It's like, and anytime there's war, there's a flight for quality. People look to something that's real and tangible, like gold and silver, as a flight for quality because things become so uncertain so quick, right? So you look at all of these things. 2026 is shaping up to possibly make 2025 look small. And here's the thing. Silver was up 147% in 2025. Gold was up like 67%.
Did you say 147%?
Yeah, that was a lot.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, you think about it, it ended the year at like 72, started the year at 28.50.
Wow.
Yeah, so even clients that came on with you like since Thanksgiving are already like really
at a profit.
Right away in the profit.
Okay, I do have to ask you though, because
amazing.
I know this has been something I've been thinking about, something I've gotten questions from friends and loved ones asking about, so we're seeing how high it is now compared to where it was in January of 2025. Now we're January 2026. Is it too late? Is it too late to get into this? If somebody's looking at this and they're like, man, look how high it is, is it going to go any higher? Do I make a move? What is your answer to that?
It's not too high. I mean, because I get calls every single day, like literally, me personally, I'm talking to dozens of people every single day. My team talking to hundreds. And did we miss the boat? Is it too high? It's like, I would never invest at an all-time high is the question. It's like, okay, how do you know that we're at an all-time high? You don't. It's higher than it has been, yes. But people said the same thing about gold 3 months ago. It's like, I'm not going to invest in gold. It's at an all-time high. What is it now? An all-time higher, right? It just keeps going up. If the fundamentals that caused the growth didn't change, then it's just the next step up to much higher prices, right? So no, you haven't missed the boat. You're going to miss the boat if you don't jump on this boat. But I think probably by late spring, early summer, we'll see 120 to 140 on silver. And probably by the end of the year, we could see $200.
Wow.
Now, so have you
Okay,
missed
because this
the
is
boat?
really important because these are like the people that are calling me. These are people that I love that I'm going to see, every month. It's like, okay, I mean, these are people that are in my life regularly that, I'm accountable to,
Yeah.
and so this is a really important question. So I think that, having this answer, I mean, I want to make sure that Flyover family hears this, my family hears this, so you feel like this is not the highest it's going to get. You feel it's going to get higher. I mean, you were the one predicting back in January it was going to be 68 in December of 2025. You are saying that this is not the all-time high.
Correct. So I have the same thing that you have. I've got family members, I've got loved ones, I've got my own personal assets. We've got all of our tens of thousands of clients, right? And I tell them all the same thing. This is the bull market of a generation. Literally, it's a commodity that everybody needs. Like and everything electronic basically uses silver. It's not going away. The demand isn't going down unless we go back into the Stone Ages. Nobody likes cryptocurrency anymore. We get rid of electronics and wars and rumors of wars cease. I mean, I don't see any of this happening, right? So the demand is going to continue. And I had a family member that I was talking to, and they said, we got to buy some silver, right? It's like, okay, we've like just need it. So they bought in at 77. What happened? Literally the next day went down to like 71.80.
Oh no.
Oh my word, it's like, oh boy, here we go. And but you know what? 3 days after that, we're almost to 78 again. You can't let daily, if you're a day trader, then daily fluctuations matter.
Right.
Right.
If you're running a trade desk, daily fluctuations matter. Actually, by the second, fluctuations matter. If you're an investor like we are, none of this stuff matters. Right? So there's a difference between a trader and an investor. We're not trading, we're investing. So these day-to-day fluctuations, don't let it bother you. The trend is moving up, and it's going to be a really, really good year because fundamentally things are getting much stronger for gold and silver, not weaker, much stronger.
And the
That
cool
is
thing,
good
people
to hear.
are the safest, with you because when you're buying bullion, you're getting the most ounces for the dollar that you're spending. I always show this example because I bought it from a coin vendor at an event I was at a table. And it's a coin. It's got a picture of Trump on it. It's neat. But I paid basically the kind of prices we're talking about now, like 2 years ago, for this coin. And I meet people at live events who paid these current silver prices per ounce a year ago. When silver was at 25 and 28 and 20, they were paying $80 an ounce.
As
Back
an
then,
investment, not as a, hey, this is fun to have.
yeah, not buying one coin because it was funny. They were doing it with their retirements because they weren't working with someone who was selling bullion. They're getting pictures, collectibles or shipwreck coins or, picture of Elvis on it or some kind of a thing, and paying inflated prices, not bullion. I was talking to my son-in-law this weekend, and like one of our hobbies, we'll make like leather bags and moleskin covers and things out of cow hides. When I buy them, looks like a cow laid out flat on the ground. It's veggie tanned leather. It takes a lot of work to turn that into a bag. Of course, you're going to sell a bag for more than the hide.
Right.
And when you're buying bullion, it's like buying the hide. That process of refining it, stamping it, printing it, all those costs,
all the work.
get baked into things. And so you don't get as much silver per ounce. That's why I always encourage people, like, ask these important questions. Where's the commissions? Is it on the front end or the back end? Are you going to pay it when you sell it? How many ounces are you getting per dollar that you're spending? Because some of these will say, oh yeah, the bullion is this ounce, but then they'll bake in a package where 20% of what you buy is some inflated value on some coin that they have inventory of, they're trying to dump off onto the client. So all of these things are really important because yes, you want silver to go as high as possible, but some of that doesn't matter if you paid inflated prices to start with. And so that's why it's important to have these conversations, to fill out the questionnaire, to talk to your team, because they take care of them through this whole process. And when do we get out? You're looking at this every day. So people don't got to stress and hit refresh constantly. You're going to be watching it through this process. So it's important to have a friend in this industry. You're probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest, in this space in bullion that there is. And so working directly with you, having contact, somebody they can talk to, having a relationship is more important than ever before.
It's huge. I mean, it just is. And there's a lot of different choices out there for people that you can do business with, right? And always follow your gut. Always follow Holy Spirit's leading on your life. Have open ears, open heart, open mind to hear from him. And you know what? He's not going to steer you wrong. He never does. And you just go with what makes the most sense to you, right? To me, what makes the most sense is simple. Maximize your ounces, minimize your cost. When it's time to sell and lock in profits, it better just be simply a press of a button where somebody doesn't have to make a market and find somebody else to buy the stuff that you're selling. This is what a global commodity does. It's silver bullion that when it's sold to the exchange, they melt it down, make it into 1,000-ounce bars. You don't have to melt down bullion. It's already in the form that it needs to be in, right? So, and it's needed. So it's easy. It's just really easy. Liquidity, your exit should be just as important as your entrance.
For sure.
So good. So good. So it's very simple, Flyover family. You just go to flyovergold.com. When you get there, there's a place you can fill out your information. David talked about the book, Thriving in Economic Tsunami. You can actually get that for free when you go to flyovergold.com. You can download that, sent directly to your email. But when you also go there, make sure you register for a free consultation with someone from Dr. Kirk's team. They can answer all your questions. Then you can hang up, make wise decisions for you and your family. Do it today. You will be so glad that you did. Dr. Kirk, thank you for your time. We really appreciate it. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Flyover Conservatives podcast with David and Stacy Whited. Please subscribe, hit the notification bell, and leave us a comment below. Lastly, if you enjoyed today's podcast, share with those who came to mind. Be blessed and make it a great day.